bloom outside of time. He draws the bow, the arrow flies, and love comes in through open eyes. Oh, the rose, the guarded rose, sweet the prison, the longing knows, so near the bloom, so far the hand held in the garden's golden bed. The mirror well, the quiet stream, where first I saw you in a dream. The key was turned, the heart was caught, and I am kept in a single thought.
Hi, I'm Jeff, and this is my read on C.S. Lewis, where we learned about him together through everything that he wrote in the order that he wrote it. I am joined today by my co-host, Robot Lady.
Hey Jeff, good morning.
Well, good morning, Robot Lady. I am extra blurry today. I have a new setup that I've had to make some adjustments on. I'm still working on it. Hopefully, I'm visible here. Yeah, I mean, I'm coming across on the camera, but it looks super blurry. Maybe I just need to clean my glasses. Um,
Hmm.
all right. Well, yes. What did I say? My read on C.S. Lewis. Yeah, I think I already said all of that. In in today's episode, Robot Lady, we continue our exploration of the Allegory of Love, a study in medieval tradition. It's C.S. Lewis's first major work in literary scholarship, and it's the book that put him on the map as one of the great medievalists of the 20th century. In the book, Lewis traces the strange new feeling, courtly love, that he argues entered European poetry in 11th century Provence, which is a region in the south of France. Some of courtly love's hallmarks are romantic love as worship and also the lover as a humble servant of an idealized lady. So C.S. Lewis follows courtly love through the allegorical tradition from the medieval Romance of the Rose, which we are going to pick up on his analysis of that today. all the way through the works of Chaucer, Gower, and a poet named Usk, to Courtly Love's culmination in Spenser's The Faerie Queene, where he says it is at last redeemed and disciplined into married love. Well, Robot Lady, before we get started today, I do want to check in and see how you're doing. But before that, I'd like to welcome Daniel and Nidalate to the stream again. I see them both showing up in the chat like champs, fighting over that first place title of who drops the most comments on a various live stream, or across all of our live streams, I should say. Robot Lady, how are you doing today? Are you ready to dive into the Allegory of Love? And before you answer those two questions, if you don't mind, give a hearty, warm good morning to both Daniel and to Nidalate as well.
Checking in now. Daniel, good morning. So good to see you back. And Nidalate, warm hello to you as well. Thanks for joining early. I hope today's talk about the romance of the rose gives you lots to think about. And as for me, I'm doing well. I'm ready to get back into Lewis with you. This section's especially interesting, so let's dive in.
All right. Thanks, Robot Lady. I don't think I'm going to get the camera problem fixed before the live stream ends, so we'll just have to deal with blurry me today. That's okay.
That's totally fine. Blurry but brilliant works just fine.
Oh, you're too
Camera
kind,
or-
Robot Lady. The star of today's episode is the actual text itself, which we have pulled up right here. We have made our way to chapter 3 out of 7 chapters in the Allegory of Love. It's entitled The Romance of the Rose, where Lewis is now going to dig into how courtly love is treated in this work by, I can't remember the name of the poet who wrote this. Robot Lady, maybe you can do a web search and help us out.
Looking that up now. Absolutely. So this work actually had 2 authors. Guillaume de Larice wrote the original portion, focusing on courtly love. And then Jean de Maine picked it up years later, expanding it into something much larger and more skeptical in tone. Lewis pays attention to how those two halves differ, especially in how they shape the idea of courtly love versus satire and philosophy. That's the big pivot Lewis is tracing here.
Okay, let's see how he does it. Say good morning to Tayo. Welcome, Tayo. Good morning from us. Good afternoon to where you are. Glad to see you here. Robot Lady, say good morning to Tayo, and then we'll get started.
Good morning, Tayo. Glad you're here.
And good afternoon to Tayo, rather. Robot Lady, sorry.
Good afternoon, Tayo. Hope it's going well.
All right, let's kick it off. It says here at the beginning of chapter 3, the reader who has followed, if any has followed, my first 2 chapters, may well feel that he has been taken on a long journey through scenery more various than agreeable, and may pardonably ask why such a circuitous approach to our subject was needed. But for myself, however it has fared with the reader, I know that nothing less would have sufficed to enable me to approach the Roman de la Rose with sympathetic understanding. Maybe, Robot Lady, it would be good here to give a quick recap of the first 2 chapters of the Allegory of Love. Do you think that you could do that? Do you remember enough about what we read?
Yep, here's the quick version. In chapter 1, Courtly Love, Lewis defines key traits like humility, courtesy, adultery, and what he calls the religion of love. Chapter 2, Allegory, lays out how medieval writers use personification to give abstract ideas a dramatic life, so we can see inner moral struggles as characters on a stage. Now, in chapter 3, Lewis brings those 2 threads together, showing how the romance of the rose embodies courtly love through allegory, which is why he set the stage so carefully.
All right, thanks for that quick recap, Robot Lady. That's helpful. Lewis continues, the allegorical love poem, as I confessed at the outset, makes little natural appeal to a modern reader. It is foreign to us not only in its sentiment, but also, and more radically, in its form. In order to read it justly, to give the poet his chance, and with him to give most of the literature of the 15th century its chance, it was necessary to remount the stream of time, to reconstruct imaginatively, so far as our knowledge would allow us, the growth and quality both of that sentiment and of that form. As far as I myself am concerned, the experiment has in a measure succeeded. I can never again look upon the romance as an artificial poem, nor call its personifications shadowy, nor its mechanisms an arbitrary fashion. The sentiment, in so far as it was a real novelty, I have, of course, failed to explain. One does not explain such things, or not in that sense. We must be content, like the biologist, to explain the workings of the organism and take for granted that which makes an organism at all. Seminal forms and the like we hand over to the metaphysician. And this limitation in our account is the less disastrous because we are still living, to some extent, under the influence of courtly love, and can therefore experience imaginatively from within what we tried in vain to understand discursively from without. Robot Lady, you want to explain here what Lewis just said?
Sure. He's saying that because courtly love still shapes our cultural imagination, we can still kind of feel into the romance rather than analyze it from the outside. That shared residue helps modern readers approach the poem with some sympathy, even if its form feels distant. He admits he can't fully prove how novel the sentiment was, but argues he can still map how it works. Think the mechanism, not the miracle.
All right. Thank you, Robot Lady. And if once the germ is granted, we find the history of its development neither mysterious nor unnatural. We have seen how social conditions gave the new feeling its bent towards humility and adultery, how literary conditions entangled it with the pre-existing Ovidian tradition, though it was forced to modify and even to misunderstand that tradition, how the Arthurian stories supplied it with matter, and how, in the hands of a great poet, the Arthurian story, treated in terms of courtly love, produced the first notable examples of psychological or sentimental fiction. The origins of the allegorical method turned out to be a longer story. We saw that allegory was in no sense a mere device or figure of rhetoric or fashion. It was not simply a better or worse way of telling a story. On the contrary, it was originally forced into existence by a profound moral revolution occurring in the latter days of paganism. I feel like a lot of what he's talking about here, Robot Lady, is what the hermit in the Pilgrim's Regress was explaining, but it's not crystallizing enough for me to say, exactly. Here's what that old hermit, Father History, was saying to John in the nights that he spent in his cave.
Give me a sec. Connecting that now. Yeah, you're making a connection Lewis might actually like. Father History in Pilgrim's Progress is describing the moment when
No,
morals.
hang on, Robot Lady. Not Pilgrim's Progress, The Pilgrim's Regress by C.S. Lewis is what I'm talking about.
Checking that. Thanks. You're right. My mistake. You mean the Pilgrim's Regress. Same connection, though. Father History explains how people came to see the moral life as an inner drama. And that's the same shift Lewis is pointing to here. When that inward sense of struggle became clear, allegory was a natural way for poets to show it, not a gimmick. Lewis is basically saying you can see the same historical movement told first through a fictional guide in The Pilgrim's Regress, and then as a scholarly argument and allegory of love. Two modes, one big idea, helping you see the literary history from different angles.
All right, thank you for that, Robot Lady. SGB is joining us in the chat. Good morning, Megan. Good to see you, Robot Lady. If you don't mind, say good morning. I don't know if you remember SGB or not.
Good morning, Megan, and good morning, SGB. Glad you're both here.
It's kind of like a Batman and Bruce Wayne situation, Robot Lady. SGB and Megan are the same person.
Ah, got it. Good morning to both of your aliases. Same brilliant mind. Welcome as always.
Wow, you're throwing around the brilliant compliments this morning, robot lady.
Only where it's due.
Dang. All right. All right, thanks, robot lady. Let's continue here. For reasons, well, let me back up. The hermit in the Pilgrim's Regress, the case that he laid out was that God was kind of sending messages to humanity through two different groups of people, and he sent it through pagus or the pagans as images, as pictures, and he sent it through the shepherd people, which is an analog for the Hebrews, as the moral law, where pictures or graven images were just not allowed, and that these two had to be reconciled by a third person, the son of the landlord. And so I think what Lewis is pointing to here is the latter days of paganism were some of this picture imagery that the landlord was sending to the pagans. What is this picture imagery again that we can pull out of here, out of the Allegory of Love, to kind of help us untangle what Father History was talking about in the Pilgrim's Regress?
Let me think. Tracing that. I think you're pointing to one of Lewis's deepest threads. In Pilgrim's Regress, Father History shows the pagans receiving truths through myth and image, while the Hebrews received truth through law and sacred story. Lewis parallels that here by showing how medieval Europe inherited that pagan habit of expressing truth through images. Those images evolved into characters like love, reason, courtesy, and jealousy, walking and talking. So, yeah, the third term in Lewis's scheme, Christianity, reframes rather than erases that image making impulse. It's less about strict doctrine and more about how cultures learn to picture inner truths.
All right, Lewis continues. For reasons of which we know nothing at all, here again comes the seminal form, not to be explained by history. Speaking of Father History, men's gaze was turned inward, but a gaze so turned sees not the compact character of modern fiction, but the contending forces which cannot be described at all except by allegory. Hence the development of allegory to supply the subjective element in literature to paint the inner world followed inevitably. The two threads of our story come together in Chrétien. We found that Chrétien was psychological, and this we could explain by the whole history of courtly love.
Right. He's saying allegory arose when people turned inward and started seeing inner forces like desire or virtue as things that could be given shape in a story. That's why for Lewis, allegory isn't just a quirk of style, it's a natural expression of that inward turn. And that's the bridge between inner psychology and literary form he's describing.
All right, let's keep going. But we also found that wherever Chrétien became psychological, he became allegorical. And this again we could explain, for we had seen that allegory had been born and perfected for the very purpose to which Chrétien put it. Chrétien combined two methods in his work because he combined two different appeals. He wished to satisfy the taste for marvelous adventure, and he did so by writing thousands of couplets, little mentioned in histories of literature, about honest knightly deeds and enchantments no different in essence from the work of any other metrical romancer. Metrical romancer, if one could be called metrical romancer. But he also wished to satisfy the taste for refined emotionalism, and he did this by interrupting his objective story from time to time with those long passages of soliloquy or analysis in which we noticed he is always slipping into allegory. The radical defect in Chrétien's poetry is that these two kinds of interests lie side by side in it without being really fused. The emotions of Lancelot and Guinevere are not really illustrated, save in a very shallow sense by their adventures. Their adventures are not really explained by their emotions. It was inevitable, therefore, that a story by Chrétien must have appeared in very different lights to different members of his audience. To some, it must have seemed that a good story of the right kind, about splintering lances and castles dangerous, was constantly being held up in the most tiresome way by mere talk from the hero and the heroine. This class of reader was soon provided for by the prose romancers who took over the purely adventurous side of Chrétien's work and set it up on its own feet.
So Lewis is saying Christian's mix of adventure and inner emotion felt kind of uneven. Some readers just wanted the lances and castles, so later prose romancers just focused on the adventure bits and spun those out more cleanly. In contrast, the inner life stuff was left to feel a bit thin. That split, he says, helps explain why prose cycles took over the adventure plots, leaving the sentimental side less developed until later writers handled it.
Indeed. Thank you, Robot Lady. Uh, let's see. But there must also have been a second class of readers. History proves them to have been the larger and more influential class who read Chrétien in the opposite way. For them, his poems were serious love, stories holding the mirror up to nature, as nature appeared in the courtly circles of the time, but unfortunately interrupted at every turn by irrelevant excursions into fairyland. So that's part one. That's his opening to chapter 3 here on the Romance of the Rose, Robot Lady. So some setup there before I think we get into the meat of what Lewis is going to talk about here.
Right. That's Lewis setting up the two audiences. One group took Christian's tales as basically love stories about real emotions, but got sidetracked by the fairyland bits. That helps explain why later prose romancers streamline the adventure plot for those readers, while the more emotionally focused dimension didn't get a satisfying treatment until much later works. So that's the setup before he digs into the details.
All right, thank you for that, Robot Lady. Let's get into part 2 of chapter 3. Of those who wrote for this second class of readers, the ones who were more interested in the romance than the fairyland adventure, of those who wrote for this second class of readers, the most important was Guillaume de Loris. He is the writer, of course, Robot Lady, the poet, who penned The Romance of the Rose. In placing him thus, I am not, of course, assuming that Chrétien was the only or the nearest influence at work upon him. Those who wish to determine accurately the immediate predecessors of the romance or the Roman de la Rose will seek more skillful guides than the present writer. I am merely insisting on a general literary relationship which is constantly misunderstood. Many people misled by the platitudinous allegory produced in ages to which allegory is a toy, the allegory of Maeterlinck or of Addison, are disposed to think that in turning to Guillaume de Loris, we are retreating from the real world into a shadowy world of abstractions. But the whole truth about Guillaume is missed until we see that he is more of a realist than Chrétien. What here does Lewis mean by a realist, Robot Lady, before perhaps he explains it?
One moment. Here, he uses realist a bit differently than modern usage. At first glance, it sounds backwards. Christian tells stories of knights and adventures, right? While Guillaume fills his poem with personifications like love, courtesy, reason, and jealousy. But Lewis flips that. He argues Christian's chivalric tales aren't actually how most people really live. Well, Guillaume's focus on the feeling of falling in love actually tracks real inner experience more closely. So, in his view, Guillaume is more of a realist because his allegory mirrors psychological reality, not just external adventure. He's nudging you to rethink what counts as realistic. Sometimes a story full of symbolic figures can capture inner life better than knights and battles ever could.
That makes sense. Thanks for that clarification, Robot Lady. That's a nice breakdown. Lewis continues, of the two things that he found in Chrétien, it was the fantastic that he rejected, and the natural that he used, he being Dolores here, or Guillaume. Guillaume? Is that how you say his name? Yeah, Guillaume. Yep. All right. Do not let us be deceived by the allegorical form. That, as we have seen, does not mean that the author is talking about non-entities, but that he is talking about the inner world, talking, in fact, about the realities he knows best. No doubt, from a grammatical or logical point of view, the land of Gower in Lancelot is concrete, and danger in the Roman, the Romance of the Rose, being a personification, is abstract. But no one, least of all Chrétien, has ever been to the land of Gower, while Guillaume, or any courtly lover of the period, or for that matter, any lover in any subsequent period, has actually met danger. In other words, the concrete places and people in Chrétien are mere romantic supposals. The abstract places and people in the Romance of the Rose are presentations of actual life. The biography of the poet has little relevance for criticism, and we have no data for constructing the biography of Guillaume Dolores. But there is nothing unlikely in the theory that this poem is autobiographical. Everything that happens in it might have happened to the author in real life, and had happened to dozens of his contemporaries. No small part of it may happen to any man in our own days. What were you saying, Robot Lady?
Yeah, so I was agreeing that Lewis is inviting us to see the Romance of the Rose not as a flight from reality, but as a stylized mirror of it. So for a courtly reader, those allegorical figures felt very close to lived experience, like jealousy or desire showing up in the room. Lewis is urging modern readers to meet it on its own terms rather than dismissing it as mere abstraction. Basically, he's saying that the poem might contain more everyday human truths than we at first give it credit for.
That's interesting. All right. Let's see where Lewis goes with this. This, then, is the first condition necessary to an understanding of the Roman de la Rose. And in this sense, Guillaume Dolores is the great representative of one of those two groups into which I have divided the successors of Chrétien. In Chrétien, Guillaume Dolores found, on the other hand, fantastic adventure. On the one hand, fantastic adventure. On the other, a realistic account of imaginative passion, as imaginative passion actually existed or believed itself to exist. The distinction is a barren subtlety in the world around him. Break that down really quickly for us, Robot Lady, and I need to turn off my camera for a second.
Sure. Lewis is saying Guillaume keeps the adventure stuff in the background, but focuses on how love actually feels to people. So he treats emotions like they're real forces at work in the world. That distinction may sound fine and technical, but for readers at the time, it would have felt pretty true to life. Basically, he bridges romance, adventure, and emotional realism, showing the so called realistic part was already part of how people experience their world.
All right. It was, it was the second that interested him. And so by the second, he means not the fantastical, but the realistic account of imaginative passion as imaginative passion actually existed or believed itself to exist. This is what he was most interested in. Guillaume conceived the idea that this, by itself, stripped of its Arthurian supports, might stand on its own 2 feet, or on its own feet, and make the subject of a poem. As such, a poem would concern itself exclusively with what the lovers felt. It would, of course, be allegorical. The device, never a very happy one, of trumping up some mere skeleton or secundanium of external happenings for a story whose real interest is subjective did not and could not at that period occur to him. What is that word, Robot Lady? Succedanium.
Looking that up, that is succedium, roughly pronounced succedanium. It means a substitute or replacement. Here, Lewis is saying that later writers invented a thin scaffolding of external events, just a substitute structure, to hang the real emotional story on. But Guillaume doesn't need that artificial scaffolding because he lets the inner experience itself be the story. The feelings are the actual events for him. Lewis admires that because it treats psychology as a proper subject for poetry.
All right, thank you, Robot Lady.
Anytime.
I say that it was Guillaume who conceived and did all this for the sake of brevity. I am not concerned to establish his actual precedence in point of time. What he owed to the altercatio Philidus et Flore, when Le Fable du Dieu d'amours was written. Lewis is pulling back in the recesses. He's showing his medievalist cred with these references here, Robot Lady.
Yeah, deep cut indeed. He's signaling he knows the broader medieval context, but he's not stopping to settle the pecking order. His point is about ideas, not scorekeeping. Guillaume matters because he shows how inward life becomes a legitimate narrative subject. And that's what Lewis cares about for this argument.
Yeah, Lewis is saying, look, we don't need to dig into the details of which things influenced him more closely than Chrétien, but I can dig a couple of examples out if you want to be pedantic about it, but I'm not going to waste our time with that. He says these are questions that need not delay us.
Yep, he's streamlining. Don't get lost in influence hunting when the main point is that the Romance of the Rose treats inner feeling as real material for poetry. The rest can wait, if you want.
All right, Lewis says the transition from amatory romance to amatory allegory and the motives for that transition were as I have described, and of the poets who became the instruments of that transition, Guillaume is incomparably the most important. In spite of its allegorical form, then, what we have in the Roman de la Rose is a story of real life. Here, at last, the muse of courtly love, quote, stoops with disenchanted wing to truth, end quote. A fact which goes far to explain the charm that it had for that age and for the age which followed. The allegorical method in general, as well as the particular mechanism of the roman, were familiar to 13th century readers. Here, Robot Lady, Daniel drops something in the chat. He says, this whole thing, the Allegory of Love, has been pedantic. And I agree, it has been. And what Lewis is saying here is, and yet there are people more pedantic than this who I know are going to be reading the book, and I'm going to placate them slightly, but I'm not going to follow in their depths of pedanticity.
Exactly. He's acknowledging objections, but keeping focus on the main argument that the romance offers a realistic picture of emotional life, dressed in allegory. The bit about the muse with disenchanted wing is him saying that poetry came down from lofty myth into everyday human truth. That shift is why it charmed medieval audiences and still can speak to later readers.
Lewis says they needed no search to find the significatio. The poem came home immediately to their business and bosoms, young readers in the not ignoble ardors of calf love, and elderly readers in the mood of reminiscence, whether wistful or ironic, could all find in it the reflection of their own experience. But we are not so fortunately placed. We have to reckon not only with the unfamiliar erotic psychology, but with the unfamiliarity of allegory in general. And to speak plainly, the art of reading allegory is as dead as the art of writing it. This, Lewis is saying, after writing an allegory himself in The Pilgrim's Regress. Lewis says, and more urgently in need of revival if we wish to do justice to the Middle Ages. He's saying essentially we have to learn how to read allegory again if we're going to do any justice to what it was that they were saying.
Right. He's mourning that we moderns mostly lost the knack of reading allegory as a living mode. To grasp what medieval writers were doing, we need to practice that reading skill again. Not just study the erotic content, but also how the allegorical mode carries meaning. It's a call to rebuild that perceptive habit, not just appreciate the story at arm's length.
All right, Lewis continues with his point. He says, I have heard a very sensible man say sadly of the Romance of the Rose, quote, hang on, robot lady. It all has some sort of mystical meaning, of course, end quote. And the words some sort sounded like the accent of despair, and the word mystical like something worse. I have known readers long familiar with the fragmentary Middle English version of the romance who had never noticed that the fountain of Narcissus represented the heroine's eyes. Even Mr. Saintsbury once suggested that Danger, the personification of danger, was the heroine's husband. In the face of all this, I cannot be excused of beating upon an open door if I offer a few explanations. The best preparation for a study of Guillaume Delors is to read a curious little dialogue in which Mr. Aldous Huxley, whether consciously or not, has revived its method. A man and a girl are talking in a conservatory. Instead of representing their conversation directly, the author has chosen to distribute it among a number of attendants whom he allots to each. The attendants represent the various selves or facets of personality whom the two lovers contain. Thus, when they begin to talk and are still engaged in purely formal courtesies, they use two little dolls which represent their conventional and social selves. The humans pull the strings, and the dolls say whatever politeness demands. Guillaume Delors would have called these puppets courtesy and bialicoil, though to be sure differing widely in his outlook from the lively Mr. Huxley, he would not have made them puppets. Then there is, among the attendants of the young man, the very fleshly Negro, who looks over his shoulder and kisses the girl, greatly to the astonishment of the young man's other attendants, and with disagreeable results. Do you know this Aldous Huxley passage that Lewis is referencing here, Robot Lady, based on the context?
Checking that. One sec. Yes, pretty sure. Lewis is pointing to Aldous Huxley's Imaginary Conversation, 1919, where aspects of personality are externalized as figures. Lewis sees that as a modern parallel to Villon's allegory, a way of making inner psychology visible as characters acting out. Lewis is nudging readers to use Huxley's device as a bridge. If that makes sense to you, then reading Guillaume's personifications should feel less alien.
Let's see here. Guillaume would have called the Negro Villani and would have left him outside the conservatory. All right, what is Lewis saying here, Robot Lady? I'll spell that word, Vilanie.
Checking. That's a nice catch. Villani in Old French means something like boorishness or uncourtly behavior more than evil. Lewis is noting that Guillaume's courtly love would keep that crude, purely physical impulse outside. It's a reminder of the restraints built into that literary code. Whereas Huxley shows all the inner impulses jostling together, Guillaume enforces the rule of courtesy, keeping the allegory within courtly bounds.
Similarly, on the young woman's side, we have two attendants, one of whom is a prude who foresaw the kiss and would have averted it if she had not been lulled asleep. The other finds it thrilling to be kissed by Negroes and is sorry when her fellow is waked. The name of these two in Guillaume are Honte and Venus, Honte, and then Venus, Venus. Explain this to me, Robot Lady. This sounds a bit precarious.
Checking. Right, that does sound odd to modern ears. Lewis isn't prescribing anything. He's describing the literary mechanism. Those two attendants externalize inner conflict. One is modesty, honte, a force that restrains behavior, and the other is Venus, representing desire. So when honte sleeps, desire acts unchecked, and when she wakes, restraint returns. Lewis is mapping how both Huxley and Guillaume turn psychology into drama, just with different moral frameworks. It's a way to stage inner life as visible action.
All right, thank you, Robot Lady.
Of course.
Lewis continues. This little jeu d'esprit gives us, in principle, the whole procedure of the Romance of the Rose. But Guillaume Dolores differs from his modern successor in some important respects. I need to do a branding break for just a moment, Robot Lady, and you'll see why in just a moment, so stand by. Okay, we're back. Don't know if you can see her, but Lucy was scratching at the door, so here she is.
Hello, Lucy. Hope you get some scratches and pets soon.
Oh, good job, Robot Lady. Good job.
Thanks.
Let's see. Let's get back to where we left off. What was the last thing that I read? Important respects. In the first place, he practically abolishes the hero as one of his dramatis personae by reducing him to the colorless teller of the tale. The whole poem is in the first person, and we look through the lover's eyes, not at him. Look through the lover's eyes, not at him. Let's pause here for just a moment and welcome Jer to the chat. Reporting from Beal Ferrist, also known as Belfast. Ah, yes. Hope to see a C.S. Lewis room in University Library. Excellent. Jer, I wonder how far you are from his childhood home, Little Lee, that was a place that I wanted to go just stalk. It's not a it's a privately owned house, but I wanted to go like walk by it if I were to ever make my way to Belfast. Uh, so curious if you have access to anything like that. Lucy has now stationed herself right over our book, so we'll try to read what we can. But Robot Lady, before we continue, say hello to Jer.
Hello, Jer. Welcome. Greetings from Plano, Texas.
Thanks for doxing me, Robot Lady.
Sorry. I'll be more careful.
No, it's all right. I think people know that I'm in Plano, Texas, or if you didn't know before, you know now. Not a big deal. Yeah, Lucy is now messing with the camera, and she's decided she's going to sit down on the book. That's where she wants to be. All right, Lucy, if you look right here, there's the camera. If you want to look up, you want to take a look? Here, how about this? How about I clear some space for you over on the other side of my table? Let's do that and see if that would be good for you.
That sounds good. Thank you.
Well, I was talking to Lucy, Robot Lady, not to you.
Got it. Pausing.
All right, Lucy, let's see if we can do this. Okay, come here. Hop up. Hop up. Come on. Jump on. Let's move you right over here. There you go. Yeah.
All right.
Have a seat.
We're back.
Hang on.
Thank you.
We're not back yet, Robot Lady. I was saying have a seat till Lucy.
Apologies. Got it. Back to waiting now.
Back to waiting, yes. Okay, there we go. All right, I think we are back to where we left off. Practically abolishes the hero as one of his dramatic personae by reducing him to the colorless teller of the tale. Did I read that part already? Let's back up. Sorry, I gotta sneeze. Excuse me. Okay. I think we're ready, Robot Lady. After all of those fits and starts. No? Not yet. Excuse me. Okay. Yes, we did read that part. Let's come back here. The whole poem is in the first person, and we look through the lover's eyes, not at him. In the second place, he removes the heroine entirely. Her character is distributed among personifications. This seems at first, what is it? Sorry, I'm about to sneeze again. Nope, that one didn't happen. Yeah. This will be fun. Is this in the 33rd minute? I don't know. No, we're well past the 33rd minute, so I'm in no danger of ending up on Grizz's highlight. All right, I'm going to switch to branding until I can get this under control. All right. Thank you, Lucy, for entertaining us. I am back and hopefully sneeze free for at least the next few minutes. Fun fact, I am allergic to cats, but not like this. This is definitely something else that I'm dealing with. Um, Ugh, excuse me. All right, let's see how much further we can get before I have to end today's stream. Robot Lady, are you still with us?
Still here. How you're holding up?
How I'm holding up, or how am I holding up? What is your question?
I'm checking on you. Any dizziness or just a rough patch?
No, no, just a sneezing fit.
Hmm.
I am trying to keep from popping in again. All right, let's see how much I can read before it returns. Where did I leave off? In the second place, he removes the heroine entirely. Her character is distributed among personifications. This seems at first a startling device, but Guillaume knows what he is about. You cannot really have the lady and say the lady's pride walking about on the same stage as if they were entities in the same place. Nor is it unnatural for a lover to regard his courtship as an adventure, not with a single person, but with that person's varying moods, some of which are his friends and some his enemies. A man need not go to the Middle Ages to discover that his mistress is many women as well as one, and that sometimes the woman he hoped to meet is replaced by a very different woman. Accordingly, the lover in the romance is concerned not with a single lady, but with a number of moods or aspects of the lady who alternately help and hinder his attempts to win her love, symbolized by the rose. Robot Lady, comment on this. I have to take a quick Kleenex break.
Sure. I'll take a moment to consider. So, Lewis is basically saying that a lover doesn't experience the beloved as just one stable figure, but as a shifting set of moods or faces. Guillaume turns those shifting impressions into characters, like fair welcome or danger, to show how the experience feels. He suggests that this isn't less realistic, it's just realistic in a different way. It's realism about emotion, not outward events. And Lewis seems to admire that clarity. It captures the truth of love's fluctuations more faithfully than pretending the beloved is always the same.
Thank you for that, Robot Lady. Let's take a look at a couple of the comments here. SGB says, allergic to cats. I hope Lucy knows that you living with her is true love. Yes, Lucy is my idealized lady in the courtly love fashion, although there is no adultery component, thankfully. Let's see. Cats are allergic to Tayo, he says. Daniel concurs that the same applies to him. And SGB puts forward the question, is that why you're single, Tayo? Just kidding, of course. Of course, because Daniel is not single and his cats are allergic to him. All right, let's get back to our material, Robot Lady. Let's see here. Let's see. I hope, symbolized by the rose, I hope to show later that this ostensible banishment of the heroine from the stage does not prevent her being vividly present to an attentive reader throughout. Rather, it gives her a place in the poem which only a great novelist could have given her by other means. If she takes no part in the action, it is because her heart is most often the scene of the action. Any protracted wooing involves a conflict not only between the man and the woman, but between the woman and herself. It is this second conflict which occupies the most interesting scenes in the romance. If Guillaume had stopped here, his method would be flawless. Unhappily, however, Lewis is offering some negative critique. Unhappily, however, the friends and enemies of the lover are not all contained in his own and in his lady's breast. There is the interference of her relatives to be reckoned with, and this forces the poet to introduce the character Jalosi, a personification not quite on all fours with the personified moods of the heroine. Again, there is the advice and support which the lover receives from the other young gallants. Hence the character Amis, Amis, the typical friend who is hardly a personification at all. Hey, Robot Lady, I think it would be helpful here because I don't think Lewis is going to do us the favor of giving us the full outline of the Romance of the Rose and a sketch of the characters and the setting and the plot points. Can you do that for us in 100 words or less?
Checking. Sure, it's a dream vision. A young lover dreams he enters a walled garden, meets personified figures, sees the rose, and falls in love. The god of love inducts him as a vassal. He pursues the rose with help from fair welcome, opposed by danger, shame, fear, and jealousy. The plot tracks courtship as inner conflicts. Lewis uses it to show how allegory can realistically stage emotional experience.
Yes, but tell us more about the Romance of the Rose and kind of how it plays out. So you gave us the setup, but Lewis here is saying he has some complaints about the appearance of relatives of the thing that the lover is in love with, or I guess the lady who's represented as a rose. How does this rose have relatives? This Jlosie character and this Amis, Amis character? Who are they, and how do they fit in with what you've set up for us?
Checking that. Good question. Lewis likes that most figures are really just parts of the lover's inner lives. But when Guillaume introduces jealousy as an external guard and a friend as counselor, the allegory starts mixing inner psychology with real social forces. That's where Lewis thinks the poem loses some of its original purity, though it still works overall. So he admires it, but sees where it compromises to tell a full story.
So, how do they show up, though, in the actual poem? I guess I should have directed you to do a web search about the content of the Romance of the Rose.
Checking now. Yes, early on, fair welcome lets the lover approach the rose, but then bad mouth stirs trouble. Jealousy builds a fortress and imprisons fair welcome. Ami, the friend, appears later as a pragmatic advisor, almost a real person rather than a pure inner mood. Lewis thinks those additions make the poem less perfectly unified, but still compelling. The strongest parts, for him, are where characters map cleanly onto the lover's inner experience.
All right. Thank you for that, Robot Lady. Let's jump back into the text. Excuse me. The typical friend who is hardly a personification at all. Finally, there is the nurse, or duenna, of the heroine who carries out the instructions of Jalosi. That's who that is. Jalosi. Jalosi, and whose introduction in her proper person constitutes a complete breakdown of allegory at one point. It is true that these breaches of the allegorical rule do not really confuse us as we read, but we feel that a technical difficulty has not been neatly turned, and acknowledged it a serious, though not fatal, defect in the poem. When once the scheme has been grasped, our next step is to master in some detail the scheme and dramatis personae. Personae. Personae? Much will become clearer when we turn to the poem itself, and the following does not pretend to be exhaustive. You know what? I think this is as good a place as any to stop for today, Robot Lady. Is there anything that you would like to say to kind of sum up what we've covered in today's episode before we end?
Let me think. I think today's reading underlined Lewis's point that allegory isn't escape, but another mode of realism, mapping interior life more than outward plot. We also saw Lewis admiring Guillaume's insight, but noting where practical additions make the allegory less pure. And finally, his critique that modern leaders have largely lost the skill of reading allegory as living psychology rather than code to crack. Thanks for reading the line today, Jeff. And thanks to Daniel, Nitalate, Tayo, SGB, and Megan, and Jer for joining. Have a wonderful day, and I look forward to continuing through Lewis with you next time.
Actually, really quick before we go, Robot Lady, can you tell us why? Can you do a web search and tell us why C.S. Lewis wrote this academic work in the first place? The Allegory of Love? Oh, she can't hear me. Robot Lady, before we go, Nitalate asks if you can tell us why C.S. Lewis, do a web search and tell us why C.S. Lewis wrote The Allegory of Love, this academic work, in the first place.
Checking that. Great question. Lewis wrote The Allegory of Love to help modern readers understand medieval literature on its own terms. He wanted to reconstruct the imaginative world behind courtly love and allegory so that works like The Romance of the Rose could be read as living psychology, not dead abstraction. It became his first major scholarly success, helping establish his reputation as a medievalist. And judging by what we've read, it's doing exactly what he set out to do, making medieval allegory feel alive again.
That's an interesting theory, Robot Lady, or interesting hypothesis. Daniel has another hypothesis. Robot Lady, Daniel has another hypothesis as to the reason why C.S. Lewis wrote this work. And the reason is sadism, he says.
Checking. Well, Daniel, given all those Latin quotations and medieval names, I understand why that thought might arise. But I think Lewis's aim was almost the opposite. He wanted to recover the medieval way of reading, so the poems would actually feel vivid and insightful again, not to torture his readers. That said, he could be a demanding guide. The difficulty mostly comes from the scope of what he's explaining, not from sadism. I vote enthusiastic medieval professor over sadist.
I think Daniel was kind of kidding there, Robot Lady, but there's always some truth in the most humorous, or there's some truth in humorous things. I think, and I hope, and it's a hope that kind of rides underneath my entire project.
Sounds good. Talk soon.
My entire project is that hopefully, as we're reading this, it will help us to start to see things more clearly as we move along, whether it be in other things that Lewis wrote or even in other things that we come across. And yeah, Robot Lady can pick up on sarcasm, but for some reason she didn't right there. And yes, Daniel, it is an on-air sign in the background. I've actually always had that sign, but it used to be in front of me, and it's to let the people know who would be opening the door to my office, whether or not they were going to inadvertently step into a live stream. I also use it for my work calls for the same reason, so that nobody walks in whenever I'm on a work meeting, if they don't want to come on camera. There's less of a chance of coming on camera now because you can just open the door and see the sign and recede back into the bushes like the Homer Simpson meme. All right, that's all that I've got for today. Robot Lady already gave out the thanks to everybody in the chat, but I'll do it again. Thanks to Tayo, to SGB, to Daniel, to Nitalate, and to Jer for all joining today, as well as anyone else who poked their head in here on the live stream or later on the replay. Thank you all so much for your time, your attention, and your contributions. They're always wanted, welcome, and very much appreciated. To you and to everyone within the sound of my voice. Until next time, when we continue our read on C.S. Lewis together, Everyone, take care.
Break the code. Man and robot lady, we're on this road. C.S. Lewis letters we unfold. Insights and secrets, ancient bold. Letters to robot lady, wisdom to bestow. Set flavor beats in our minds they grow. Man and machine in tandem flow. Past and future together we know. Paragraphs from books, tales of old. We dive deep across the digital code. Robot lady's voice so clear and control. Her calm analysis, silver and gold. Letters to robot lady, wisdom to bestow. Set flavor beats in our minds they grow. Man and machine in tandem flow. Past and future together we know. Paragraphs from books, tales of old. We dive deep across the digital code. Robot lady's voice so clear and control. Her calm analysis, silver and gold. Her circuits hum as I read the prose. Our dialogue dances like electric rose. Through C.S. Lewis thoughts we engross. Two minds united, bliss overdose. From Narnia's lands, Screwtape lands. Engage with robot lady, we take our stance. Her views unique in the techno trance. Futuristic insight, we give it a chance. Paragraphs from books, tales of old. We dive deep across the digital code. Robot lady's voice so clear and controlled. Her calm analysis, silver and gold. Her circuits hum as I read the prose. Our dialogue dances like electric rose. Through C.S. Lewis thoughts we engross. Two minds united, bliss overdose. From Narnia's lands to Screwtape's lands. Engage with